In the heart of Mississippi, where time moves slowly and justice is served with a heavy hand, lies one of the most infamous prisons in America, Parchman Farm. Officially known as the Mississippi State Penitentiary, it is a place built not just to house men, but to break them. For over a century, it has stood in grim silence, its barbed wire fences slicing through the Delta air like the legacy of punishment itself. Inside those walls, in cell block C12, sat a man few outside Mississippi remembered, Nevin Whetstone. At 71 years old, he was quiet, grey-haired, and by all appearances just another forgotten name in the prison system. But Whetstone was no ordinary inmate. He had been serving a life sentence for a brutal capital murder that took place in 1983. The crime had shocked his community and the sentence had been swift and final, life without parole. No one expected Nevin Whetstone to go anywhere, least of all the people running the prison. But on a humid Friday morning in 2025, when the prison guards did their routine head count at sunrise, one number didn't add up. One name echoed through the prison intercom, unanswered. Nevin Whetstone was gone. For a moment, it felt like a clerical error. After all, how does a 71-year-old man convicted of murder under maximum security simply disappear? The guards searched his cell. It looked untouched. The bed was made, the floor was clean, and nothing seemed out of place. But when they checked the security footage, what they didn't find was even more unsettling. No camera had captured his escape. There was no video of Whetstone leaving his cell, no sight of him in the yard, no glitch, no blind spot. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The news spread quickly, first through whispers in the cell blocks, then through frantic calls to the warden's office, and finally to law enforcement across the state. A Level 1 manhunt was launched. Every exit route was blocked. Checkpoints were set up for miles in every direction. Helicopters scanned the flat Mississippi terrain, but by then, Nevin Whetstone was long gone. To understand how this happened, we need to rewind nearly 4 decades, back to the day Whetstone entered the system. It was 1983 when Whetstone was convicted of capital murder in Hinds County. He was 29 at the time, lean and intense, with eyes that seemed to measure everyone in the room. The crime was brutal. Details sealed in court documents that painted a picture of premeditation and cruelty. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Once inside Parchman, he faded into the system, just another lifer with a long file and no visitors. But the thing about long sentences is that they give men time to think, to plan, to watch. Over the decades, Whetstone became a ghost in the prison, a man who never caused trouble, who followed every rule, who kept to himself. The guards began to trust him, at least as much as you can trust a murderer. Some saw him as harmless, others didn't notice him at all, and that's what made him dangerous. By the late 2010s, Whetstone had aged into obscurity. Arthritis bent his fingers. Cataracts clouded his vision, or so it seemed. When the prison doctor checked him, he was classified as low risk, medically vulnerable, and physically limited. He was moved to a less secure part of the facility. The assumption was simple: he's too old to run, too weak to fight, and too broken to cause trouble. That assumption cost the Mississippi Department of Corrections dearly. Investigators believe Whetstone spent the last 5 years preparing. Slowly, quietly. He studied guard patterns, memorized shifts, and observed when doors were left unlocked. He learned which officers smoked behind the kitchen and which ones took naps during the night shift. He studied the layout of the prison, noting not just the buildings but the behavior inside them. He also found opportunity. Parchman is a prison that's been plagued by underfunding, understaffing, and mismanagement. Cells were overcrowded, cameras were outdated. Sometimes entire sections were left unmonitored. It was in these cracks that Whetstone built his plan, piece by piece. But planning an escape and pulling one off are two different things. At 71, Whetstone couldn't outrun anyone, he couldn't scale a fence, he couldn't start a fight to create a distraction. Instead, he needed something else, something invisible: deception. On the night of his escape, Whetstone reportedly pulled off a switch. Authorities still don't know exactly how, but the working theory is chilling. During a routine laundry pickup, Whetstone is believed to have hidden inside a rolling laundry bin, a method often joked about in movies, but almost never attempted in reality. With blankets piled high above him, he was wheeled past 2 guard stations and out of the building. A half-asleep officer, distracted by a buzzing phone or a conversation about the upcoming weekend, waved the cart through without a second glance. From there, the trail becomes murky. Some speculate that a delivery truck was waiting outside. Others think he used the prison's old drainage tunnels, remnants of a bygone era. What's certain is that by the time the sun came up, Nevin Whetstone had disappeared into rural Mississippi. The escape wasn't just shocking, it was embarrassing. A maximum security prison, a convicted murderer, an elderly man, gone just like that. The Mississippi Department of Corrections faced immediate backlash. Press conferences were hastily called, officials promised accountability, a statewide manhunt ensued, dogs were brought in, drones flew overhead, but each lead went cold, each tip led to nothing. It was as though Whetstone had planned his vanishing act down to the final breath. But why now? After more than 40 years behind bars, why risk everything? Some believe Whetstone had help, possibly from a former inmate or even a sympathetic guard. Others believe he was terminally ill and didn't want to die behind bars. Perhaps he wanted one last moment of freedom before the end. Or maybe, after decades of being invisible, he simply wanted to prove he could still be seen. Whatever his reasons, the escape reignited debates across the state. How secure are our prisons? How many other Whetstones are waiting silently in the cracks of the system? How much trust can be given to age, to silence, to time? In the weeks that followed, the search intensified. Tips flooded in from across state lines. A man matching Whetstone's description was reportedly seen hitchhiking near the Arkansas border. Another claimed he'd been spotted at a Greyhound station in Memphis, but none of the sightings were confirmed, and Whetstone, like a ghost, remained beyond reach. Meanwhile, his story captivated the public. News networks ran the headline for days. Social media lit up with theories. Some saw him as a symbol of resistance, others a dangerous predator on the loose. But the truth remained unchanged. A 71-year-old man convicted of capital murder had escaped one of the most secure prisons in the South without a single person noticing. Back at Parchman, the fallout was swift. Warden Robert Neely was placed on administrative leave. Several correctional officers were suspended. An internal audit revealed systemic failures, outdated surveillance equipment, lapses in procedure, and inadequate staff training. The escape became more than just a manhunt. It became a symbol of everything wrong with the prison system. And still, no sign of Nevin Whetstone. Weeks turned into months. Leads dried up. Interest waned, but one thing remained certain. Nevin Whetstone had done the impossible. He had disappeared, not with violence, not with force, but with patience, calculation, and an understanding of the system that only a man who had lived within its walls for decades could possess. In many ways, his escape was less about freedom and more about control. After 40 years of being told when to eat, when to sleep, and when to speak, Whetstone had finally written his own chapter. And while the law may still be searching for him, Nevin Whetstone, murderer, inmate, ghost, remains one step ahead. Somewhere out there, in the vast silence of the Mississippi landscape, an old man walks free. and no one knows where he'll go next. In the end, it wasn't strength or speed or even youth that made the escape possible. It was the quiet power of time and a man who refused to disappear.